Okay, so I think this is a wonderful topic. It's really exciting for me to talk about. So we're going to be doing an overview of the bison handling operation. You probably heard it called the bison roundup. It's now been changed to the bison handling operation. So Karen and I are going to tag team this. Karen is the person that oversees this, so she really has a lot of information and knowledge about this topic, but I wanted to help out a little bit since she's been doing a lot of the programming, and it's a great way for me to learn as well. So what we'll be talking about is what is this bison handling operation and why do we do it? And I really feel it's a privilege for me to work with these animals, and I think it's really important for us to all know why we're doing this. And as volunteers, you're the ambassadors for the Refuge, so it's I thought this would be a great topic. So thanks for joining us, and thank you, Karen, for taking the time to put this together. So just a little basic overview of the bison herd. So why were they introduced? Well, sure, they're amazing animals to see. Everybody loves watching the bison and lots of visitors come to see them. But the real reason, the primary reason they were introduced is because they're a keystone species, meaning they are so integral and important to that ecosystem of the tallgrass prairie. Without it, it really isn't a tallgrass prairie. Their impact is so huge. So their behavior, their natural behaviors impact the soil, the plant life, other animals. So that's to reconstruct a prairie, adding the bison is just a big part of balancing out that ecosystem. Secondly, of course, as you all know, they almost went extinct, the bison. So that is the other objective, is bringing them back and being part of a conservation herd that we're going to be talking a little bit more about at a national level. So that is a little bit of background of why we have bison. So how do we manage them? As you probably already know, again, we have them in an 800-acre enclosure, and they are treated as wild animals. So they find basically their own food and water. We do give them mineral blocks. Karen determines when they need that. And so they are treated as wild animals. And we do have a carrying capacity in the 800-acre enclosure. So that means that these animals, we want to maintain them at a herd level that's not going to negatively impact the ecosystem within that 800 acres. And additionally, we want to make sure there's enough resources for the bison as well. So we tried to keep the animals at 55, a number of 55, and then additionally keeping the even age distribution of sex and age. So that's a little bit about the basic overview of the herd.
We manage the bison as part of a metapopulation, which means it's a group of populations, because the herds are all small and scattered. We have to help move bison around. We got the bison in 1996, our first bison, and we had, those bison came from the Fort Niobrara, Wichita Mountains, and the National Bison Range. And then they did genetic testing on all the Department of Interior bison. And based on that information, the Fish and Wildlife Service decided to relocate some of the bison at the National Bison Range. So we became one of the places those bison went. So our bison basically had a lot of diversity because they came from those three herds, but it was genetic diversity, but it was common genetics. And there was some unique genetic material at the National Bison Range, and they wanted to make sure that was duplicated somewhere else in case something happened to that herd. But we manage, there's 6 herds in the Fish and Wildlife Service that are part of this metapopulation. And so we have had a few bison come in at other times. After our original, oh, sorry, I didn't say this, that in 2006, we got this new herd of bison. And then we've gotten a few others that came from Rocky Mountain Arsenal in Colorado, which actually was, those bison also came from National Bison Range. So they're related. And then some of them came from White Horse Hill Game Preserve in North Dakota, which used to be called Sully's Hill. So the idea is just to keep them from becoming inbred. So that's why we do genetic testing. And that's the main emphasis is on making them, preserving the genetic diversity as much as possible. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about genetics because it gets confusing trying to explain what we're doing without using some of the terms. And I know for a lot of people, it's been a while since you had high school biology and you might not remember all this stuff. And some of it I even had to refresh on. So basically, if you remember cells, and then the nucleus includes chromosomes, and that's the genetic material you get from your parents. And chromosomes are made of DNA, and then certain areas of a chromosome might contain genes. There's also a lot of DNA that doesn't really seem to do anything, but there are sections of DNA called a gene. So then this is where it gets a little more technical. So you get a chromosome, you get genes from both parents, basically. So for each gene, so there's a gene for a specific trait, but then there are different expressions of that trait. So like for eye color, so you have a gene for eye color from both your parents, but or you may have more than one gene, I don't know. But one eye color might be, one gene might be for blue eye color, one for brown eye color. So those are alleles. So the allele is how a gene is expressed. So, you know, for bison, this might include things like how well they can digest certain kinds of plants, or, you know, I don't know what they would be, but how it might include how well they can survive in really hot temperatures. So some bison might be better adapted to have, you know, genetics that make them more suitable to high temperatures, and others might be better adapted to dry conditions or something like that. So there's all these characteristics. We don't really know what, you know, genes, each, you know, specific gene does, but we just know that we want to have all the alleles represented, as many as possible, and to have those continue to be passed on, so that in case something happens that, you know, that allele all of a sudden becomes really important for the survival of the species. So I hope that I explained that in a way that makes sense. Feel free to ask questions if you want to. I don't want to go into too much more technical stuff, but it's really about allele frequency and trying to maintain all the diversity of alleles. And then cattle hybridization, a lot of people, I hear people say this all the time, that we got rid of our old herd because they were hybridized with cattle, but that's not the reason why we did. Basically, this just shows, and I don't care what you call them, if you call them beefalo or cattle, but, and I think these things are sort of guesses about what the mix of these individuals is, but you can have any range, because cattle and bison were crossed intentionally in the early 1900s. That's where a lot of the bison that are still around came from those, or had, you know, some remnants of those bison in their background. We're trying to minimize that as much as we can, but basically what we have, I mean, you have this one down in the corner, it looks pretty much like a bison. We don't know if it's got 20% cattle alleles or 2% cattle alleles, but we just want to keep that number as low as possible. And basically in the federal herds, when they did that genetic testing, they found that it was less than 2% cattle alleles represented in those bison in the federal herds. A lot of private herds of bison have more like 20 or 25% cattle alleles. So it's, you know, that's a big difference. And like I said, we don't know what those alleles are for. We don't really know if it's going to make a difference, but we just want them to be as much bison as possible. And so if we have the option, we would minimize that. The bison we got from the National Bison Range, as far as we know, we haven't detected any cattle alleles, but they probably have some way in their background, so there might be a little bit in there. So the main purpose of the bison handling is to maintain the population. So most years we have between 10 and 15 calves, and we might lose, you know, have mortality of 2 or 3 bison, but or in a bad year, maybe a few more, but it's not nearly as many as the ones that are being born. So we just want to, we have to maintain the carrying capacity of the bison enclosure. So yeah, that's the main purpose. And then since we're handling them, we have to remove some of the bison. So then we also do genetic testing. So all the calves get their genetic tests, and we get samples from them, and then we give them microchips so we can identify them later. And we also do some health screening, so by looking at their, taking blood samples. So those are the main things that we're doing with the bison handling. And then Nancy's going to talk about this part.
So this low stress handling has been really fun. I'm really interested in actually both human and animal behavior, like studying both of it. But this gentleman, his name is Whit Hibbard, and he is a rancher from Montana. And he is a protege of a gentleman that has been studying low stress livestock handling. And so Whit studied with this gentleman, Bud Williams, and learned about this, and he started applying it on his ranch in Montana and saw how wonderful it worked. So what is this all about? So low stress handling can be applied to other animals. It doesn't have to be just cattle. So it's being applied now to our bison. Lee Jones, who is the wildlife biologist that oversees the health of the bison herds at the national level, she was the person that brought him in, and Lee has taken him to all the different refuges. And what Whit has been doing is providing some training. So what is low stress handling, as well as he went out and observed our bison handling operation and made some gave us some constructive feedback. So what is low stress handling? Is using the animal's natural instincts and movements and behavior, and using that instead of pushing and prodding against them, it's working with them and working with their natural behaviors. So for instance, I can give you an example. Did you put the slide in about the zigzag, Karen?
That I have that in a couple of later slides, sorry.
Oh, okay. No, that's okay. So it's using the animal's natural behavior, and we'll show that in the next slide. But so on approaching an animal at a certain angle, it will move a certain direction. Instead of using a flag or a rattle paddle, which we've used in the past, a rattle paddle is a paddle with a lot of noise and a long stick. So these things are being phased out, and we're using the animal's natural behavior and our approach to them and the movement of the animal. So using flags cautiously and communicating and being very quiet, less people. So it's going to cause a lot less stress for people and animals, and therefore it's going to be easier to do, and it's going to be causing a lot less injuries. And as Karen said before, and I quote, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So it's been really fun learning about this and then seeing how effective it is. So Whit has been has been to the refuge in 2018 and 2019, and I don't know if he's going to be coming back, but I hope he does. And there's actually, he does have a website that you can go to, and I think Karen's going to share it if you'd like to learn more about this low stress handling technique.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat at the end, but he just did a publication that has an article including some video clips and everything, and I'll share information on how you can access that if you want to.
And then, of course, our friends are always there for us. So the Friends of Neal Smith National Wildlife Refuge, no matter what we do, they're there to support the operation, the volunteers, the wildlife. So the friends come out to the bison handling event, and we have a small trailer where we set up snacks and food and coffee, and Joan and some of the other board members and friends, volunteers come out and help us out and serve us food. And we even get hot chili, homemade by Joan. So we are very fortunate to have the friends support us in all our operations. But in addition to the bison handling operation, they also pay for a person to gather the hay on the refuge, and that hay is then used for feeding the bison during the bison handling event. So thank you to our friends as always.
Yeah, here's the zigzag slide if you want to.
No, I'll let you take care of it unless you want.
Okay. So one of the, some of the things that we have to do to prepare, I mean, we're just getting equipment together, and we have to get a generator for the squeeze chute, but basically the day before we bring in the family herd into this corral. So we generally are able to lure them in, just have them follow the truck that has salt in it. And I mean, we're not even, we used to always give them salt in the corral, but it's been years now. I've been trying to get them to go other places, but they still have it pretty much ingrained in them that when they want salt, they go to the corral. So if I just go out there with salt, they'll start running toward the corral a lot of times. So it's pretty easy to get them in. They just like salt. It's like candy to them. But then that's mostly the family group, because there are bulls that are kind of scattered around. So it would just take too long to, I mean, it would just add a lot of confusion to try to go get them all together. So we go get the bulls after we get the family group in, and some of them we might be able to lure in, but some of them are a lot more suspicious. So we have to do some herding and encouraging them to move with our trucks, and the zigzag. So this is what Nancy was talking about, is just driving in this zigzag pattern, and that makes the bison go straight away from you. If you want straight towards them in a line, they would want to see what you're doing, so they'd turn around, or they'd, you know, run off to the side or something. So it just sort of uses the natural instincts. They want to stay with the rest of the herd, but they also want to see what you're doing, because you're like a predator and they're prey. So they just, you know, don't really want to be approached in certain ways. So that's one of the techniques. There are a whole bunch of other things. There's rocking back and forth, and certain just moving your body when they're in the facility. So we learned a lot of really neat techniques from Bud. So this is what the handling facility looks like. And when we bring them in, can you see my pointer? Anybody? Okay, well, they come in from the right side here, and there's a drive fence there. And so if we're trying to herd them in, we chase them in through that area. We sort of coax them in now. We used to chase them, we don't anymore. We encourage them to move, and then they'll go into the big corral. And then as the day we handle them, we move them in through the smaller corral in the middle, and then they go down this big alleyway, go around the corner, and then they go into the tub, and which is this round thing in the center there. And then from there they get scanned, and then they either go out onto the refuge again, or they'll go to the squeeze chute. So I'll kind of show you some of that process. So this is getting them from the big corral into the first alleyway, and we use trucks for this, and they've been able to do some things lately that we learned from WIT about just, you know, sort of having these trucks go parallel to each other, and it's a lot smoother than it used to be. There used to be a lot more chasing of the bison, and they'd run around in circles, and so then they go in, they go down the alleyways, and then this is one of the first, as they're going through there, there's gates, so we separate them until there's only one bison. And then this is going into the tub, which has this curve. And then the reason it was built this way was, the thinking was that it would slow the bison down, and I don't know, that was thought to be a good thing, but now we kind of, it kind of stalls them out a lot of times because they can't see what's around the corner. So it's a little bit of an impediment, but the bulls go into this tub, and then we can close the gate behind them and get them in a small enough area that we can scan them there, because the bulls don't fit down the next alleyway. And then they turn around, we have another gate, and they'll turn around toward the bottom of the picture. There's a gate behind that bison that we can let them out. But they all go through the tub here. And then once we get them in this smaller alleyway, so this is where the bulls don't fit because their horns are too wide, but this is where they get scanned. So each of the bison has a microchip, and it's behind their left ear. And so we scan them with this scanner, and then it's attached to a little computer that tells us the chip number and the age and sex of the animal, and then what its destination is. So whether it's going back out to the refuge, or it's going to the squeeze chute, and then some of those go to the holding pen after that. So we can find out, you know, a few things about the bison at this point. We also look at their body condition if we can, but it's a little tough to see them because they're so far down. And then if they're going to go to the squeeze chute, this is what it looks like. This is the what we call the pit, and you can see the squeeze chute there. So the bison will go in there and get squeezed in. It's hydraulically operated, and Steve runs that. Its head gets caught, so it can't go forward, and then it's sort of restrained in there. And then while they're in there, the calves, well, everybody who goes in there probably will get blood samples taken. So this is Rachel taking blood, and we'd use that for disease testing, and also for the calves, they get their DNA samples taken. We also do tail hair, pluck some tail hair, and the follicles can also be used for DNA testing. And then they also get a microchip inserted, the calves do, or anybody who doesn't have one yet already. And then they get scanned again just to make sure the microchip is still in there. And then the calves will get let go from there. And this is the blood, the tube, the one tube anyway, has blood in it. So that's used for disease testing. And there's usually 3 or 4 diseases that we're looking for. And it's just to give an idea. It's not necessarily that animal. It's to see if there's anything in the herd that is obvious that could affect the rest of the herd. And then the card is the DNA samples. Here's some of the cards drying. And then they get put into a holding pen, the ones that are going to be transferred out. So we divide them up into pens, and this is actually predetermined. So it's really amazing that we don't have to make this kind of decision on the spot. It's usually based on their age and sex. So this looks like some yearling bulls and some 2-year-old females are put together. And then usually the yearling females would be in a separate pen. And if there were any 2-year-old bulls, they'd go in another pen from that. So it's just so they don't fight. And then the ones that aren't, we're just scanning. It just helps us keep track of who's still out there. So we know they're still around, and then they get let back into the prairie. So we're happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Karen, I have a question.
Okay.
And that question is, with all of the microchipping that's going on, I presume it's going on in other holding areas or other refuges as well.
Yep.
Are the data, the complete set of data, are they at Fish and Wildlife headquarters, or where do we maintain that?
Oh, that's the Wildlife Health Office has that. So Lee Jones that Nancy mentioned, she does all this. She uses all the information to decide which animals leave, are transferred away. And I guess I forgot to mention, so the ones that are selected to transfer out is based on their genetics, and we basically use it how related they are to the other bison. So we prevent inbreeding and maximize the genetic diversity in our herd. And a lot of the bison that we excess that we remove from the herd go to tribes or conservation organizations outside of the Fish and Wildlife Service.
So there is a central registry, though, of all of these, are there not? Yeah, is there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So if there are any bison, like the ones that we got from other refuges, Lee has all the genetic information on them, and so it's all tracked, so we know who everybody is.
Okay. Okay. And how many are there altogether of these that are really highly homogeneous, 2% or less? Are there 30,000 of these guys out there now, or 10,000?
No, it's like, I think it's 11,000 within the Department of Interior.
Okay.
So Park Service, of course, Yellowstone has a big chunk of those, but in the Fish and Wildlife Service, I looked up that number and I don't even remember what it was. 1,700, I think it was, that we're managing.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?